Mason Aldridge had it all: wealth, power, and a reputation as one of the brightest minds in the tech world. As the CEO of Axiom Innovations, his cutting-edge breakthroughs in AI and robotics had revolutionized industries and earned him the nickname the Man of the Future. Yet, beneath the polished exterior, Mason was a man haunted by his past, a past that drove him to build an empire but left his personal life in ruins. "Mr. Aldridge, we have a situation," his assistant Claire said, her voice trembling slightly as she stood in his sprawling penthouse. "What kind of situation?" Mason asked, barely looking up from the holographic projection of his next big innovation. "Eduardo Mendoza," Claire began, her words slow and deliberate. "He's willing to invest in Axiom, but there's a condition, a very personal one." Mason's gaze sharpened. "Personal? What does that mean?" Claire hesitated before blurting out, "He insists you bring a significant other to the dinner." The room fell silent, except for the faint hum of the city outside. For a man who had devoted his entire life to work, the request was almost laughable. Mason had no time for relationships, let alone the emotional baggage they came with. His work was his identity, his fortress, and his shield. "This is absurd," Mason finally muttered, but he knew there was no avoiding it. Mendoza's investment was crucial for expanding Axiom into the European market, a move that could secure the company's dominance for years to come. Claire pressed on gently. "Perhaps you could hire someone for the evening, just to meet the requirement." Mason frowned, his jaw tightening. It was unorthodox, even reckless, but he didn't have much of a choice. "Fine," he said, his voice firm. "Find someone suitable. Make it happen." Little did Mason know, this desperate decision would unravel his carefully controlled world and force him to confront the vulnerability he had buried for so long. Mason Aldridge wasn't born into privilege. Far from it. He grew up in a cramped apartment in Brooklyn, sharing space with two sisters, a younger brother, and dreams that felt almost comical in their enormity. His father, a mechanic, worked double shifts to keep the family afloat, while his mother stitched clothes for neighbors to earn extra cash. From a young age, Mason had an insatiable curiosity for how things worked. At 14, he built his first robot using discarded parts from a local junkyard. It wasn't much, a boxy contraption that shuffled forward on creaky wheels, but it ignited a spark in him that would never fade. "Mason, get inside! Dinner's ready!" his mother called, but he barely heard her, engrossed in fine-tuning a motor. "Just 5 more minutes," he shouted back, the determination in his voice unwavering. His brilliance didn't go unnoticed. A teacher at his high school pulled strings to get him into a summer coding program, where Mason outshone students from far wealthier backgrounds. By 17, he had a full-ride scholarship to MIT, where his revolutionary projects left professors speechless. But success came with sacrifices. At MIT, Mason fell deeply in love with Emily Carter, a classmate whose laughter had a way of lighting up the dullest lecture hall. For a while, it seemed like he had it all, love and ambition intertwining perfectly, until the day Emily left. "I'm sorry, Mason," she had said, her voice trembling. I can't live on promises. I need stability, and he can give me that." "He?" Mason's voice cracked, the betrayal cutting deeper than any failure ever could. She looked away, tears streaming down her face. "Goodbye, Mason." That heartbreak became the fire that fueled his empire. Mason swore he would never again let anyone dictate his worth. After graduation, he climbed the corporate ladder at lightning speed before starting Axiom Innovations in a dusty garage with nothing but his savings and sheer willpower. Within a decade, Axiom became a global juggernaut, with Mason gracing the covers of Forbes and Time. Yet, despite his monumental success, his personal life remained frozen in the shadow of that betrayal. His sleek penthouse in Manhattan was more a fortress than a home, filled with cutting-edge gadgets but devoid of warmth. Maria, his longtime housekeeper, was the only person who dared to speak candidly with him. "Mr. Aldridge, you've got everything: money, power, respect. But none of it can keep you company. she said one evening, setting down a plate of his favorite meal. "I'm fine, Maria," Mason replied curtly, his tone leaving no room for argument. But was he? The request from Eduardo Mendoza threatened to expose the cracks in his carefully constructed armor. For the first time in years, Mason felt a pang of doubt, a reminder that no amount of success could replace the human connections he had chosen to avoid. And now, with the dinner looming, Mason found himself in unfamiliar territory, searching for a stranger to fill the role of a lifetime. 2 days later, Claire stepped into Mason's office, a folder clutched in her hands. "I've shortlisted a few candidates," she said, setting the folder on Mason's desk. Mason leaned back in his chair, his eyes scanning her with skepticism. "Candidates? For what, exactly? Pretending to be my girlfriend?" Claire sighed. "Yes, Mason. For your meeting with Eduardo Mendoza. You said to handle it, so I'm handling it. These women are professional, well-spoken, and discreet. They understand the arrangement." He flipped through the profiles, each one accompanied by polished photos and glowing recommendations. But none of them felt right. One candidate looked too rehearsed. Another seemed more interested in the paycheck than the role. His frustration mounted with each page. "This isn't working," Mason muttered, pushing the folder aside. "Then what do you suggest?" Claire pressed, her tone sharper now. "You don't have much time. That dinner is next week, and Mendoza isn't going to wait forever." Mason rubbed his temples, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. "I'll figure something out." Later that evening, Mason decided to clear his mind with a rare visit to his favorite coffee shop, a quiet corner spot where he could escape the noise of his life. As he sipped his espresso, a soft voice caught his attention. "2 cappuccinos and 1 black coffee coming right up." He looked up to see a young woman at the counter, her movements fluid and confident as she handled a long line of customers. She wore a simple name tag, Ava Harper. There was something about her, an effortless charm, the way she managed the crowd with grace, even when a particularly difficult customer raised his voice. "Ma'am, I said no sugar in my coffee," the man barked. Ava's smile never wavered. "I apologize for the mistake, sir. Let me fix that for you right away." She handed him the corrected drink, and the man's irritation seemed to dissolve under her composed demeanor. Mason watched, intrigued. As the rush subsided, Ava wiped the counter and glanced around, catching Mason's gaze. Emboldened by an idea forming in his mind, he approached her. "Excuse me, Miss Harper," he began, his voice steady but deliberate. Ava turned to him, her blue eyes curious but cautious. "Yes? How can I help you?" "My name is Mason Aldridge," he said, noting the flicker of recognition in her expression. "I have a rather unusual proposition for you." Ava raised an eyebrow, folding her arms across her apron. "Unusual? You've got my attention." Mason hesitated for a moment, realizing how absurd his next words would sound. "I need someone to accompany me to a business dinner. A significant other, to be specific. It's an arrangement, strictly professional, and I'd compensate you generously for your time." Ava blinked, clearly taken aback. "You're asking me to pretend to be your girlfriend?" "Yes," Mason admitted. "I realize it's unconventional, but I saw how you handled yourself here. Your confidence, your ability to adapt under pressure. Those are qualities I need for this situation." Ava stared at him, the gears in her mind turning. She wasn't a stranger to tough choices. Supporting her younger brother and paying off student loans meant working multiple jobs, often late into the night. The offer was tempting, but she wasn't about to agree without clarity. "What's the catch?" she asked, her voice firm. "No catch," Mason said. "Just professionalism. I'll brief you on the details, ensure you're prepared, and cover all expenses. All I need is your presence and cooperation." Ava considered him carefully. Mason Aldridge wasn't just any man. His name was synonymous with success, a figure splashed across business magazines. This wasn't a random customer offering her a shady deal. This was an opportunity that could change her circumstances. "All right," Ava said finally, though her tone carried a hint of caution. I'll do it, but I have conditions of my own. Name them, Mason said, his relief evident. I won't be treated like an object, she began. You'll respect my time and boundaries, and if I feel uncomfortable at any point, I can walk away. Deal? Deal, Mason agreed without hesitation. The next day, Ava arrived at Mason's office, her posture both nervous and determined. She wore a simple but neat outfit, her dark hair pulled back into a ponytail. Thank you for coming, Mason said, gesturing for her to sit. We don't have much time, so I'll brief you on Eduardo Mendoza and the dinner. Ava listened intently as Mason explained the stakes. Mendoza was a prominent investor with a reputation for valuing personal connections. The dinner was more than a business meeting. It was a test of character and authenticity. I'll arrange for a personal shopper to help you choose an appropriate outfit, Mason added, and we'll rehearse some talking points to ensure you're comfortable. Talking points? Ava asked, arching an eyebrow. You mean like a script? Not exactly, Mason replied. Just some context about my company and the people you'll meet. I want you to be prepared, not robotic. Ava smirked. Good. Because I'm not great at pretending to be someone I'm not. Then don't pretend, Mason said, surprising even himself. Be yourself. That's why I chose you. Their first stop was an upscale boutique, where a personal shopper named Lauren greeted them warmly. Dresses, shoes, and accessories were pulled from racks, each one more elegant than the last. Try this one, Lauren said, handing Ava a navy evening gown. When Ava emerged from the dressing room, Mason found himself momentarily speechless. The dress accentuated her natural beauty without being ostentatious. Well? Ava prompted, a hint of nervousness in her voice. It's perfect, Mason said simply. As they left the boutique, Ava turned to Mason, her tone softening. Why are you doing all this? You could have picked anyone, someone more polished. Mason hesitated before answering. Because I don't need polished. I need real. And you're as real as they come. For the first time since this strange arrangement began, Ava smiled. Not the polite smile she wore at the coffee shop, but something warmer, more genuine. And for Mason, it was the first hint that this deal might be about more than just business. The days leading up to the dinner were a whirlwind of preparation. Mason, ever meticulous, wanted everything to be perfect. For Ava, it was a crash course in the high-stakes world of corporate networking. Eduardo Mendoza is more than just a businessman, Mason explained during one of their prep sessions. He values authenticity. If he senses even a hint of pretense, this deal is dead. Ava nodded, her confidence tempered by nerves. So, no pressure, right? She quipped, trying to lighten the mood. Mason allowed himself a rare smile. No pressure, he replied, his voice softer. You'll be fine. Just be yourself. The dynamic between them shifted with each passing day. What started as a strictly transactional relationship began to feel like something more. Mason found himself drawn to Ava's unfiltered honesty, while Ava glimpsed a side of Mason that the world rarely saw. A man who, beneath his calculated demeanor, carried the weight of his past. One evening, as they sat in Mason's penthouse reviewing key details about Axiom Innovations, Ava asked, "Why did you choose me? Out of all the people Claire must have shown you, why pick someone like me?" Mason looked up, his expression thoughtful. "Because you're not like anyone else," he said. "You're real, and that's what Mendoza needs to see, a genuine connection, not some rehearsed act." The sincerity in his voice caught Ava off guard. She looked away, hiding the faint blush on her cheeks. The day before the dinner, Mason arranged for Ava to meet with a stylist. Lauren, the personal shopper, had already chosen a stunning black evening gown, but the final touches were crucial. "You've got natural elegance," Lauren said as she styled Ava's hair into a sleek updo. "All we're doing is enhancing it." When Ava stepped out in the finished look, Mason was waiting. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Manhattan skyline glittering behind him. When he turned and saw her, his breath hitched. "You look incredible," he said, his usual composure faltering. "Thanks," Ava replied, her voice light but her eyes betraying her nervousness. "I just hope I don't embarrass you." "You won't," Mason said firmly. "You'll be perfect." As the evening approached, the tension in the air was palpable. For Mason, this dinner wasn't just about securing an investment. It was about proving that he could let someone into his carefully guarded world, even if only temporarily. The restaurant was the epitome of elegance, with its dim lighting, crystal chandeliers, and soft classical music playing in the background. Mason and Ava arrived early, wanting to settle in before Eduardo and his fiancée Sofia arrived. "You ready?" Mason asked as they stood outside the private dining room. "As ready as I'll ever be," Ava replied, offering a small smile. When Eduardo and Sofia entered, their presence was commanding but warm. Eduardo, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, extended his hand to Mason. "Mason Aldridge," Eduardo said with a broad smile. "It's an honor to finally meet you in person." "The honor is mine, Eduardo," Mason replied smoothly. "This is Ava Harper, my partner." Eduardo turned to Ava, his eyes appraising but kind. "A pleasure to meet you, Ava." "The pleasure is mine," Ava said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. Sofia, elegant and poised, stepped forward. "I've heard so much about Axiom Innovations. It's impressive what you've built, Mason." "Thank you," Mason said, glancing at Ava. "But I couldn't do it without the support of remarkable people like Ava." The dinner began with polite conversation, but it didn't take long for Eduardo to dive into deeper topics. "Tell me, Mason," Eduardo said, sipping his wine. "What drives you? Axiom's success is unparalleled, but I'm curious. What's the man behind the company like?" Mason hesitated for a fraction of a second. "I'm driven by a desire to create something lasting," he said. "Axiom isn't just about profit. It's about innovation that changes lives." "And what about you, Ava?" Sofia asked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "What's it like being with someone like Mason?" Ava glanced at Mason before answering. "It's inspiring," she said, her words genuine. "Mason's dedication is unlike anything I've ever seen. But he's more than just his work. He's kind, thoughtful, someone who believes in the people around him." Mason looked at Ava, her words hitting him harder than he expected. For the first time, he realized how much he valued her perspective, not just as a part of their arrangement, but as a person. As the evening progressed, Ava's natural charm shone through. She shared anecdotes that had Eduardo and Sofia laughing, and her insights into technology and literature added depth to the conversation. By the time dessert was served, Eduardo seemed thoroughly impressed. "Mason," Eduardo said, raising his glass, "I believe we're going to accomplish great things together. Your vision is exactly what we need, and Ava, well, she's proof that you surround yourself with exceptional people." "Thank you, Eduardo," Mason said, his voice steady but his relief palpable. "I'm looking forward to working with you." On the ride home, Mason turned to Ava. "You were incredible tonight. I couldn't have done this without you." Ava smiled, the warmth in her eyes softening the edges of her exhaustion. "It wasn't just me. We're a team, remember?" For Mason, the word team took on a new meaning that night. What started as a business arrangement was beginning to feel like something much more profound and far more complicated. The success of the dinner with Eduardo Mendoza brought a wave of relief to Mason, but it also left him unsettled in ways he hadn't anticipated. The deal with Eduardo was set to transform Axiom Innovations, but for the first time in years, Mason found himself thinking about something, or rather, someone, beyond his work. Avenue. Their professional arrangement was clear-cut, yet their interactions were anything but transactional. She challenged him in ways no one else dared, her candid remarks often cutting through his polished corporate persona. One evening, as they reviewed updates on the collaboration with Eduardo, Mason closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. "You've done more than I ever expected, Ava," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Well, I couldn't let you face Eduardo alone," she teased, a playful smirk on her lips. "Besides, I've learned a lot from this. It's been unexpected. Mason studied her for a moment. Unexpected how? Ava hesitated before answering. I guess I didn't expect to enjoy this as much as I have. Working with you, seeing how much you care about what you've built. It's inspiring. Her words hit Mason harder than he let on. He had spent so long building walls around himself that he didn't realize how much he needed someone like her. Someone who saw the man behind the empire. Their connection deepened in the weeks that followed. Mason began inviting Ava to more events, not just as part of their arrangement, but because he genuinely valued her presence. One evening, after a particularly long day at the office, he suggested something out of character. "Let's take a walk," Mason said as they left the building. Ava raised an eyebrow. "A walk? You don't strike me as the take-a-walk type." "Maybe I need a change," he replied, his tone light but sincere. They strolled through Central Park, the city lights casting a soft glow over the trees. The conversation flowed effortlessly, touching on everything from childhood memories to dreams they had once been too afraid to chase. "Why did you start writing?" Mason asked suddenly, his curiosity genuine. Ava glanced at him, surprised by the question. "It's the only way I've ever really understood the world. When things were tough growing up, stories gave me hope. Writing them helped me make sense of everything." Mason nodded, her words resonating with him. "You should keep writing," he said firmly. "You have a gift, Ava." Ava smiled, touched by his sincerity. "Thanks, Mason. That means a lot." Mason's next invitation came with higher stakes, a prestigious tech gala where industry leaders and media giants would gather. He wanted Ava by his side, not as part of their deal, but because he couldn't imagine going without her. "You really want me to come to this?" Ava asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "It's one thing to fake being your girlfriend for a dinner, but a gala? With cameras and reporters?" "Yes," Mason said simply. "You've handled everything else with grace and confidence. This will be no different." Ava hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but if I trip in heels, you're catching me." Mason chuckled. "Deal." The night of the gala arrived, and Mason couldn't help but feel a flicker of nerves, a rarity for him. When Ava stepped into the room wearing a midnight blue gown that shimmered under the chandelier lights, he found himself momentarily speechless. "You clean up nicely," Ava said, breaking the silence. "So do you," Mason replied, his voice almost a whisper. The gala was as grand as expected, with high-profile guests mingling over champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Mason introduced Ava to his colleagues and investors, each one charmed by her intelligence and wit. "She's remarkable," one executive whispered to Mason. "You're lucky to have her." Mason didn't respond, but the words lingered in his mind. As the evening wore on, Mason and Ava found themselves on the dance floor during a slow waltz. The music was soft, the room buzzing with conversation, but for Mason, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. "I need to say something," Mason began, his voice low. "What is it?" Ava asked, her eyes searching his. "This started as a business arrangement," he said, his words deliberate. "But it's become so much more to me. You've brought something into my life I didn't know I was missing." Ava's breath caught, her pulse quickening. "Mason." "I care about you, Ava," he continued, his gaze unwavering. "More than I ever thought I could." For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Then Ava smiled, her eyes glistening. "I care about you too, Mason. More than I ever thought I would." As the song ended, Mason leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her lips. It was a moment of quiet revelation, one that would change everything between them. The gala might have been a celebration of innovation, but for Mason and Ava, it marked the beginning of something far more profound, a partnership not built on contracts or necessity, but on genuine connection and mutual respect. The confession at the gala marked a turning point in Mason and Ava's relationship. What had started as a business arrangement had blossomed into something genuine, something neither of them had expected, but both had come to cherish. Weeks passed, and their connection only deepened. They spent evenings at Mason's penthouse, sharing stories, reading books, and cooking simple meals together. For Mason, Ava brought a warmth and light to his life that had long been absent. For Ava, Mason's unwavering belief in her potential inspired her to dream bigger than she ever had before. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, Mason seemed uncharacteristically quiet. Ava noticed his thoughtful expression as he chopped vegetables. "What's on your mind?" she asked, leaning against the counter. Mason hesitated, then set down the knife and turned to her. "I've been thinking about the future," he said, his tone serious but soft. Ava raised an eyebrow. "The future of Axiom Innovations or—" "No," Mason said, stepping closer. "Our future." Ava's heart skipped a beat. "Mason, I've spent my whole life building something I thought would give me purpose," he continued. "But meeting you, being with you, it's shown me that none of it matters if I don't have someone to share it with." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Ava gasped as he opened it to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Ava Harper," Mason said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in Ava's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Mason. Yes, I will." Mason slipped the ring onto her finger, and in that moment, the world seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them and the overwhelming joy they shared. Mason and Ava's wedding was a small, intimate affair held in a serene garden surrounded by close friends and family. Ava's simple yet elegant gown and Mason's tailored suit reflected their unpretentious love. Their vows were heartfelt, each word a testament to the journey they had taken together. "I never thought I'd find someone like you," Ava said during her vows. "Someone who saw me for who I was and believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." "And I never thought I'd let anyone in again," Mason replied. "But you broke down every wall I built and showed me that love is worth the risk." Their honeymoon was a reflection of their shared passions. They traveled to literary landmarks, visiting places that had inspired their favorite writers, from the English countryside to the bustling streets of Paris. Each destination deepened their bond and filled their hearts with new memories. Back in New York, their lives intertwined seamlessly. Mason continued to lead Axiom Innovations with a renewed vigor, his personal happiness spilling into his professional success. Ava, encouraged by Mason, dedicated more time to her writing and eventually published her first book, a collection of short stories that received critical acclaim. Their home, once a cold and sterile penthouse, became a warm haven filled with laughter, love, and the occasional chaos of their growing family. The arrival of their daughter, Lily, brought even more joy, cementing their bond as a family. Mason often found himself marveling at how much his life had changed. He had started with nothing, built an empire, and then, through an unexpected twist of fate, found everything he never knew he needed. What do you think about Mason and Ava's story? If you were in Mason's shoes, would you have taken the same risk? Or if you were Ava, would you have stepped into such an unconventional arrangement? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were to rate this story, how many points would you give it? Your feedback is invaluable to us, so take a moment to share your opinions. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this story, give it a like, share it with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming and dramatic tales. Thank you for watching, and we wish you a day filled with joy, love, and inspiration. Stay tuned for more stories, and may luck and happiness always be with you.